So you have to be very, very careful when you're taking this apart, just because most of the housing is plastic and it's very brittle because it's already 50 years old. And so if you break or crack the plastic, then you risk exposing the internals to dust, debris, and water, and it'll cause problems down the road. The hardest part about taking apart the wiper motor switch is bending the tabs that are holding the housing in place. And it's these 4 tabs that are practically on each corner, and that's holding the plastic housing in place. And so what I did was I was able to get a plier and to grab onto this. I couldn't get a good grip on the actual tab, and I didn't want to bend or pry onto the plastic housing because it risked cracking it. So I was able to, with the pliers, to get a good grip on the edge of the bracket right here, and also on the other side right here. And I was able to bend it to where it'll move the tab over enough to where I can get some clearance there. So this is a little knob that you pull off of the wiper switch. It goes on and off. It really just slides in like this, and that's how it stays in. Either way, I'd recommend you taking it off to clean it up, and you're gonna have to if you wanna get this part out. So once you remove the housing from the bracket, you wanna make sure that you're very, very careful with the mechanism and how you remove it, because there's a lot of internal parts that are very easy to lose. They're small, there's these small springs in there. So once you take it apart, you risk dropping them or misplacing them. So just be very, very careful. And I recommend removing the inside mechanism upside down like this, so that way the springs and this little tab right here, they don't fall through, like if I were to flip it around like that. So these are the 2 wiper switches that I had, and neither of them were working properly. That's why I decided to take them apart. But this is the newer one and this is the older one. This is the first one that I actually had installed in the vehicle. And the way it was working was everything was functioning in reverse. So all the power modes were switched around. So high power mode was actually the park mode, and the park or off mode was causing the motor to run on high power mode. So everything was switched around. I tried reversing the connection or flipping it around and thinking maybe the wiring would cause it to work properly, you know, easy fix, but it was causing the motor to stay on, and I was having some issues, you know, parking it and even getting it from high power to low power. So I figured I'll remove this one and go with my older switch. The problems I was having with the older switch is everything was working fine, but it was just getting stuck moving in between modes. So obviously there was some buildup and some gunk inside, and so I figured we could take these apart and see what's actually causing the problems. Now the first thing I'm noticing on these 2 wiper switches is on the one that had all the settings reversed, this one, when I compare it to the original one, the one that had all the settings correct, that this one has this little triangle piece pointing this direction and this one the other direction. So I'm assuming that that is what's causing all the problems with all the settings being reversed on this, the newer one. Now, I'm thinking that somebody opened this up at one time and they didn't take notice at the direction that this was supposed to be in. And since these 2 tabs fit in either way, they put it in the direction that they thought it was, and they didn't get it right, and that's what's causing all the problems. Now, just remember this spring in here, you can easily lose it, as you can tell. You don't want to misplace it, and you definitely don't want to lose it. But I'm going to try to put it in this direction. I'm going to put it back in the car, switch it on, and I'm hoping that that's what fixes it. So that's what we're going to test, and that's what I'm going to show you guys right now as I put this back together. So we're going to clean and prep both of the wiper switches as if they're permanently going on my car. The reason for that is I either have an extra wiper switch or I can sell one for 25 bucks. But either way, we're going to clean them both up, put some dielectric grease in there so they slide properly, and have them ready to go. So you want to make sure to take everything apart and clean everything properly, make sure everything's functioning the right way. There's a lot of moving parts here. There's springs, there's gunk that can build up over the years, and so you want to make sure that everything is clean, because you got to make sure you have conductivity, and you got to make sure that everything's going to be working smoothly. So you want to make sure you remove these 2 springs, inspect them, clean them, and make sure that they're complete and they're working properly. You have a tall one on this side, and then you have the shorter one right here. The reason why this one's taller is this actually butts up against this little lever right here on this knob, and that's what pushes the switch back out. So you want to make sure you check these things and make sure everything's working and make sure everything's clean. Then we remove this piece. It's pretty basic, it just slides out, but we want to make sure we clean all that. And the last thing you want to remove is this triangle piece, the one that we flipped around. Now we know the right way it's supposed to go, but I'm still going to take it back off so we can clean it, check the spring, make sure everything's good. And the good thing is we have this on video, so that way I can revert back to the video in case I'm confused or in case I forget. First thing you're going to notice in the housing is that it's dirty. It's got a lot of gunk and buildup. We're going to clean all that out and put some dielectric grease in there so that way it's functioning properly again. So the second thing you'll notice is that we're getting a ground point right here on the housing. This is what grounds out the internals of the wiper switch to the rest of the car. This grounds to the bracket to the dash frame, and the dash frame to the rest of the car. So you want to make sure that you have a good grounding point that's clean if you want your wiper switch to work properly. And the last thing I'll show you in the housing is this little ramp. That's what is the guide for when you push down the switch to go into the washer squirter mode. And when you push down, that's what slides against the ramp and actually activates the low power mode. And you can always feel it when you push it down, it kind of slides over too. And that you want to check if you're not able to slide over properly. And before you put everything back together, you want to make sure everything's working properly. You want to make sure everything's working smoothly, everything's greased up. So you want to go through all the switch modes. Everything feels good. You want to push this down, make sure that works when you want to activate the squirters. Make sure you can go back and forth without a problem. When you put it all back together, just make sure the grounding point is going to be on this side of the bracket. You see how the little notch is a little bit off center towards the left side. And that's exactly where the first position is going to be, over here to the far left. Now when you put the housing and the bracket together, you want to make sure that this little bulb that's part of the housing goes into this little notch into the bracket, and that's where you know it's going to fit. And you want to make sure that the grounding point that I showed you earlier fits snugly with the tab, so that way when you bend it in or you connect it, it has a good solid grounding point. And the last thing we need to do is bend these tabs back in and make sure that this is properly secured. All right, so now we're gonna test out both wiper switches, making sure they work, making sure they're both functioning properly. And you are able to remove the switch and access it from underneath the dashboard from the back without removing the dashboard. It's a lot easier if you don't have the seats in. That way you can get the right angle and the right position. So as you can see here, from my hand, you get a pretty clear line of sight. It is limited and you will have problem accessing it, but it is possible without removing the dashboard. So I didn't have a full visual, but I was able to creep under far enough to where I can get a decent look. Most of what I had to do was feel around for the screws, and then I used a long extension to remove them. So you shouldn't have a problem, but I do recommend removing the seats. It'll make it a lot easier. So we're gonna be testing out both switches, making sure they're working properly before we install either one of them. So you wanna get in that habit where you test things out and bench test them before you even install them. The last thing you want is to install it and then you find out it's not working properly. And so to test it, we got our grounding point. We gotta ground the bracket in order for us to test it right. So right now we're gonna test the first switch out and make sure it's working properly. Now, I'm underneath the dashboard right now. I pulled the wires from inside the dashboard down below as far as I could, and you can see I got my grounding point right there. So let's go into the low speed, and as you can see, it kicked on. That's good. High speed, okay, and then parking. So now we know the first switch is good, it's working as intended. it parked itself properly and it went into low and high speed without a problem. The only difference, and I got two things, is I haven't installed the windshield wipers yet, so that's why you can't hear it fanning across the glass. And the other thing is I haven't installed the squirter motor, so I won't test that right now. And I'll probably do another video where I install the squirter motor and the tank and all the tubes, and then we test it out. So that's the only reason why I'm not doing it right now. And here's the second switch that we're going to test right now. This is the one that was having problems where everything was reversed. And so we're going to go ahead and make sure that what we did worked. So here's low speed. As you can hear, that kicked on. Let's go to high speed. And that kicked on. Let's park it. And everything's working good. So now we know that the second wiper switch is also good, that we were able to fix it just by reversing that one little triangle piece that was backwards. So there you have it. We're able to take apart both switches, clean them, re-grease them, making sure that they were working properly and smoothly, making sure that they were ready to be installed in the car. And there you have it. That's how you take apart those switches and making sure you can clean them properly. If you like that video, hit like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.